Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our portfolio analytics webinar put on by PriceLabs. My name is Monique. We're going to get the webinar started in just a minute. I'm going to wait a few moments for more people to join. In the meantime, I am enabling chat for everyone. If you could kindly in the chat where you're from, how many properties you manage, if you're using a PMS, things of that sort, anything that'll help us learn a little bit more about you and the properties that you're running would be awesome and helpful in us kind of tailoring this webinar to you. So go ahead and drop that in the chat while I give everyone a few more minutes and then we'll get started. Hey, Kate, thanks for joining. All right, I'll give everyone one more minute to join in case we have some stragglers and then we'll get going here. Hi, Anna, welcome. All right, so looks like it's going to be a small group of us today. I'm okay with that. Like I said before, my name is Monique. I'm one of the solutions consultants with PriceLabs. I've been with the team for almost 2 years now. I'll be running the webinar today. I also have David on Q&A. He's one of the other solutions consultants in the US. Today, we're going to be covering portfolio analytics. I have a slide deck, and we're also going to jump into the tools, so feel free to follow along. A few housekeeping items. As we are going through, if you have any questions, please utilize the question and answer box. That way while I'm speaking and so that the questions and answers get recorded with the webinar. The webinar will be sent to you. The webinar recording will be sent to you after we are done today. We usually send it a couple hours later because the recording has to process on Zoom, but you will get a copy of it. You may also see me turn off my camera just so that things run a little smoothly. Sometimes the Wi-Fi here is a little spotty, so I'm going to try to save you that trouble that I usually run into. So if you can't see me, don't worry, I am still here and I'll be guiding you through the entire session. All right, so what is portfolio analytics? Portfolio analytics is a tool within PriceLabs that is meant to help you determine business intelligence and analyze what's happening within your own portfolio. So we're going to cover a little bit more in detail about what portfolio analytics can do, features, capabilities, what the KPIs are that you can view, what filters you can view. Then we'll take a little bit more of a deep dive into the KPIs and the historic report section. And then we'll talk about the pacing report section. There are 2 sections within portfolio analytics, and I will show you both of them. So, like I said, portfolio analytics is a business intelligence tool meant to help you identify trends in your bookings, to kind of start to refine your strategy. So you'll be able to do that based on things like booking trends, occupancy, ADR, and we'll cover all of that. You'll be able to track and analyze your property's KPIs, find opportunities where you can increase revenue and or occupancy. Portfolio analytics also makes it easy for you to identify underperforming listings. That way you can quickly make changes to those specific listings without having to click around and look through your entire portfolio if you're managing a lot of listings. The last thing that portfolio analytics can do is actually look at market comp sets. So if you are also using market dashboards within PriceLabs, you'll be able to pull that dashboard data into portfolio analytics to compare your performance to the market. If you haven't taken the market dashboard webinar, I suggest you do that as well. I think the one this month is going to be running on Wednesday. That would be August 7th. We typically run portfolio analytics and market dashboards on the first Wednesday and Thursday of every month. So definitely check that out next week. All right, so let's jump into the tool and take a look at how you actually get to portfolio analytics. So here I am on my dashboard. Portfolio analytics is going to be right here in the black bar at the top, right in the middle. Now, portfolio analytics is available at this point for most property management softwares. I think I saw that one person is connected directly to Airbnb for the time being. One person is connected to Lodify. Both of those have portfolio analytics available. If you don't see portfolio analytics here, that just means that you are using one of the property management softwares that currently doesn't support portfolio analytics. We are working on building it out for all of the PMSs that we integrate with. So if you don't see it there and you want to know a timeline for when it will be available to you, shoot our support team a message and they'll be able to answer that and give you an update. So when you click on portfolio analytics, the dropdown is going to give you two options. Please ignore this right now. I'm in a demo account and that is not available to everyone else, but we do have a new feature coming. But for now, you're just going to see the two sections, KPIs and historic reports, and then the pacing reports. So today we are going to start with the KPIs and historic reports. All right, can everyone hear me? I think I lost you for a second when I turned my camera off.
Yes, can hear you again.
Cool, thank you. All right, so we're going to jump into portfolio analytics. We're going to start with the KPIs and historic report section. When you click on that, you're going to start by seeing this listing filter here. So when you're managing a large portfolio, it's really helpful to be able to filter the listings that you're viewing. If you just want to see the data for all your listings, you're just going to click on Show Analytics. If you want to dive into the nitty-gritty, you can separate out the listings and view portfolio analytics based on several different items. So you have tags, which we won't cover today, but we do cover that in the 101 and 201 webinars. You can view portfolio analytics by PMS, by group, subgroup. You can also view it on an individual listing level if you want to identify kind of specific trends for a listing that might be underperforming. That would be helpful. Then you've got, whether it's syncing or not syncing, bedroom size, and by city. So for today, we're going to start by looking at the analytics for my entire portfolio. Now, while this loads, keep in mind this is a demo account, so There may be some things that look a little different or a little wonky compared to what yours will look like, but you should be able to get the gist of everything that I covered today. Just give it one more moment. All right, while the portfolio analytics is loading, I'm going to quickly cover the KPIs that we'll be talking about today. Um, some of you might not be familiar with KPIs, some of you might be. I'm going to cover it regardless. There's 6 major KPIs that you're probably going to want to track. So the first one is ADR, or average daily rate of the booked nights. This is looking at what the rate is on average for just the booked nights that you have on the books for future or past occupancy for specific reservations. So, for example, if you have like Christmas week booked at $500 a night, that would be a $500 ADR. Occupancy, pretty self-explanatory. It's the percentage of nights that are booked out of the total nights that are available in a time frame. Some people like to look at adjusted occupancy, which removes blocked dates from those calculations. Some people like to look at total occupancy, which includes bookings and blocks. In portfolio analytics, we are typically showing you paid occupancy in all of the occupancy sections. RevPAR is an interesting one. So RevPAR kind of combines ADR and occupancy to give you a full picture of how your property is performing. So when you're looking at just ADR, you're only getting the average daily rate for listings that are booked for the specific period. So like I said, that example of having a $500 ADR for Christmas, maybe for Christmas week, that's a great ADR. But what if Christmas week is the only week that you have booked? That's going to mean that your occupancy is lower and your RevPAR therefore is going to be lower. So while your ADR is $500, having 7 nights out of 31 occupied leaves you with a 22.5% conversion rate. So if we take that, or I'm sorry, occupancy rate. So if you take that 22.5% and multiply it by that $500 ADR, that's how you get your RevPAR. So RevPAR stands for revenue per available rental, or revenue per available room. It's a term that people use to refer to their rentals now. So revenue per available room or rental of 112, about 113 a night for the month of December. It's going to depend on your area, but that kind of gives you a fuller picture into how you're performing. So RevPAR combining ADR and occupancy. People do ask us what a good RevPAR is, but it's not as easy as just giving a straightforward number like it is in occupancy. The reason why is because with RevPAR, you need to compare your RevPAR performance to the market as well as your historical numbers. Ideally, you want to try to perform or improve your RevPAR year over year. And depending on your strategy, whether you'd like to beat the market or be in line with it. So not quite straightforward, but definitely an important metric to track. Your booking window is going to be important because that tells us how far in advance the bookings are made, also known as lead time. So in different seasons, you might have different booking windows. In your peak season, your booking window might be a little bit longer, and in your off-peak season, you might see a shorter booking window. These are important things to know. That way you can determine what your strategy is going to be for those certain time periods. We also will be covering things that discuss length of stay, or LOS. That's just telling us the number of nights booked for reservations on average. So it'll tell us, are you getting mostly 3-night reservations? Are you getting mostly week-long reservations? How does the length of stay change based on the time of the year? Things like that, definitely important to know. And then pacing is going to be the whole second half of what we cover, which is going to go over how quickly certain dates are booking, usually compared to prior periods. So we'll be able to look at how your occupancy is pacing, for example, year over year, based on the day, based on the same time last year or the same time the previous year 2 years ago. So we have our, oh man, okay, there we go. Don't scare me like that, computer. All right, so here we are in our portfolio analytics, KPIs, and historic report section. A couple things that you should note when looking at this, just to get you acquainted with the system. You have a little guide right here on the left-hand side that tells you how many listings we're looking at, the number of bookings, what the currency is in. One important thing to note is the revenue and ADR details. So that's going to vary based on the PMS that you're using, whether we include just the rental amount per night or whether we include rental amount plus taxes and fees. We will specify that right here. Then right below that, you have a section where you can jump to the different areas of this report, so you don't have to scroll up and down. And then down at the bottom, we have our help articles, the video guide, and links for you to report issues and suggest improvements. Up here, you can always filter the listings, the same kind of filters that showed up when we first opened this. You've got your little refresh button here. Portfolio Analytics refreshes roughly every 24 hours because every time you sync, we also pull in any new reservations that have come in, and they should show up in Portfolio Analytics within 24 hours of receiving that reservation. Allow you to upload or download. It allows you to upload a CSV if you're missing reservations. That's not going to be available to everyone and is really only important if you've done like a PMS transition and your new system did not import all your historical data. So just know it is possible, but you have to request that. All right, let's jump into why we're all here. So what are we looking at and how can you use it? So these are most of those metrics that I just covered. So by default, when we load portfolio analytics, we're going to be looking at the KPIs for year to date versus the same period last year for stay dates. Now, you can change this to view data by the quarter, by month, this year, this year being the entire year and not just year to date. So it would also include future occupancy and future reservations, last quarter, last 30 days, and you can also choose custom dates. And if you click on the custom dates, this box allows you to come in here and actually select what those dates are. The second box tells us for this KPI section here, what period are we comparing it to? So do you want to compare it to the same period last year? So for example, we're looking at year to date. So January 1st through July 31st, comparing it or through August 1st, compared to January 1st through August 1st, 2023. You can also change the dates here to custom. So you can do, I mean, it doesn't really make sense for year to date, but if you were looking at the last 30 days, you can do same period last year, or you might want to look at same previous period, which would look at the previous 30 days. The last thing you have the ability to look at is stay dates versus booking creation dates. So all of this data right here is showing us the KPIs based on the current stay date. So when is the reservation happening? If you change this to booking creation dates, what that's now going to tell me is this is how much revenue was generated in this booking period. So from July 1st through July 31st of 2024, I generated $595,000 in revenue, which is up compared to the previous 30 days. That's how much was booked for any future period when we're looking at booking creation dates. We also give you a few other metrics here. You may notice that occupancy is missing, and the reason why is because we can't calculate occupancy based on a booking creation date. We can only calculate occupancy based on when a stay date is occurring, because all of this revenue is spread out kind of indefinitely over the future, right? So we can't really calculate occupancy based on that. The green and red numbers underneath each KPI indicate how much you are up or down over the previous period that you're looking at, whether it's the same period last year or the same previous period. That's what we're comparing it to. Here's where your length of stay will show. So the average length of stay over the selected period, the number of bookings that you've received, what the average booking window has been in that period. So when you start to look at things month over month, that average booking window will change and you'll start to notice whether or not there's certain trends and indicators that can determine how you adjust your strategy. And then down here, you've got your number of active listings. When you're managing a large portfolio, that's definitely something to keep in mind. Because of course, as your number of listings that you manage go up, your revenue is most likely going to increase. So you want to be paying attention to things like the RevPAR in that case, because that will account for the increased number of listings. Whereas if we were just looking at revenue, yeah, of course we're up $92,000 year over year. But when we look at the RevPAR, we're actually down for RevPAR, which indicates there might be some changes that we need to make. Any questions, please drop them in the chat. I'm going to start moving along to all the different charts that we are able to view here in Portfolio Analytics. So scrolling down to this first section here, trends by stay date. So this is going to show you by default, broken down by month. You do have the ability to look at things weekly, daily, or by day of week, which is helpful to indicate whether or not you're in a weekend heavy market. This data that I'm looking at definitely indicates that this is a very, very weekend heavy market. As you can see how low some of the revenue is by day of week versus how high it is on the weekend. I like looking at things monthly. It's a nice, simple way to kind of get an idea of where you stand. We're going to load all historical data that we can for you here. So the red line is going to be showing this year, but we're also going to have future looking data and all the historical data. So you can see the red line here is we outperformed last year in terms of revenue in my portfolio, but these future dates, we're not quite there yet. But that's because the stay dates haven't occurred yet. So we might be outside the booking window. We still have plenty of lead time left to generate reservations and generate revenue. So that's why you might see it start to drop off there. We also show you the RevPAR, occupancy, and ADR by default. You can also click on these to view a couple different other metrics based on the trends by stay date. So for example, you can look at the number of booked nights across all your units. You can look and see how the number of active listings that you managed has grown over time. Unique bookings, number of check-ins and checkouts, all of these things are available to you just by clicking on that drop-down menu. If you want to dive further into detail here, like let's say that you're looking at things on a weekly basis, it's going to adjust based on year over, it's still going to show you the full year, but we can adjust based on when like your peak season is just by clicking and zooming like that. That way the chart's a little bit easier for you to read and you're able to dive into the nitty gritty. So you can see here that for whatever this week is in May, it definitely outperformed last year in terms of revenue by quite a bit. But it looks like there might be some sort of event there where we can always expect the revenues spike up based on the historical data and based on the fact that we have some future data on the books here for 2025. The next section is breaking down the trends by booking creation date. So same toggle that you're able to switch back and forth from on the top, you can also view in chart form here. By default, we show you the revenue and ADR, but again, if you click The drop down, you're able to look at more data for the trends by booking creation date. So the average length of stay, the ADR, the book nights, etc. And this is again just showing you, okay, as of today, so today, 2024, it's August 1st, we generated $14,000 in revenue for future stays today. This number is going to start to creep up on the revenue for the trends by booking creation date chart as the month goes on. And then at the end of the month, we'll be at our final numbers. Same with ADR, you're able to track how the ADR evolves over time based on when the reservations are made. So is there a certain time period where people are booking that they're paying more for a reservation or paying less for a reservation? This seems pretty stable, although we do see a dip in the summer, which could indicate that people are booking for future dates that are in the off season when prices are a little bit lower. Maybe one thing to look at. All right, any questions on these charts, the first two sections that I covered? Please drop them in the chat. Keep in mind, one thing I didn't mention is that you can hide certain year data just by clicking on the metrics at the bottom. So if it's easier for you to just look at year over year and that's all you're really concerned about, feel free to just click and hide those other dates. All right, moving along to the length of stay and booking window trends. This is probably one of my favorite sections because it's going to tell me what the lead times are and how long people are staying for. So what we're looking at right now are all the reservations, all the booked nights that were made between July 2nd and August 1st. So for the last 30 days, based on the booking creation dates. And what we're showing here is the total of booked nights. So what I'm seeing is that 173 nights were booked, 0 to 1 day out. So either same day or day before the check-in date. 173 nights were booked for a 0 to 1 day check-in within this 30-day period. Whereas in the same period, 608 nights were booked that had a lead time of about 1 to 2 months. Hopefully that makes sense. We're also looking at similar thing here. For length of stay, what we're seeing here is that we have 1,064 booked nights that had a length of stay of 3 to 4 days that were booked within the last 30 days. Now you can change this metrics to look at the booked nights by booking window and length of stay. Kind of just gives you a little bit more detail on what length of stay people are booking for within this booking window. So you can see here, now that I've broken it out, 310 nights that were booked within the 1 to 2 month mark were for a length of stay of 3 to 4 days. So you can just see that breakdown by hovering over it once you switch this over to book nights by booking window and length of stay. You can also look at stay dates here. So now this is looking for stays that occurred from July 2nd to August 1st instead of looking at bookings that occurred from July 2nd to August 1st. And we can see that for that month, for the month of July, looks like the lead time was most lead times were between 2 to 4 weeks out and 1 to 2 months out. So decent lead time here. A good amount of reservations even coming in further out, and pretty good lead time, or I'm sorry, pretty good length of stay as well. So 2 days and 3 to 4 days looks like they're the most common, but it looks like we do still get some 7 to 14 day stays and 5 to 6 day stays. Not a ton of one night stays happening in the month of July. So what can you do with this information? This is kind of going to help you determine what your minimum stay strategy should be. In our one-on-one webinar, we do cover our minimum stay recommendation engine, which takes market data and gives you recommendations on how you should set your minimum stay. But you can also use this to determine what you might want to do, especially when it comes to seasonal settings. So you'll be able to see here. Let's take a look at like December of last year. Oh, still a decent lead time. Um, but you do see that the shorter lead time here did come up a bit. You'll be able to see like how does that lead time evolve based on what month we're looking at. Oh yeah, so for January, yes, there's still a lot of reservations coming in that are 1 to 2 months out, but there are a lot more reservations coming in that are happening within the last week, which is would be these two here. Any questions? Go ahead and drop them in the chat. I'm going to start going down to the listing level metrics. Now, this is going to be really helpful for people who are managing a large portfolio to identify outliers in performance. By default, we're showing you the listing occupancy compared to the market occupancy. So you'll see here if I hover over one of these one of these dots, this listing name or this listing's occupancy is at 87.1% and the market occupancy is at 40%. So this is outperforming the market. If you're looking at something that's in like the upper section here where the market's all the way down here, like in the 80 to 100% occupancy where the market is stuck at like 40%, to me that indicates, you're performing well. So this will change based on, looking at listing revenue against, you can compare your revenue to your occupancy. So, okay, here we have a really high performer in revenue, but it's only got 67% occupancy. So not the highest occupied, but highest earning in revenue. A couple outliers here. And you can identify some down here that might be pacing behind or underperforming compared to the market. For example, this one, your occupancy is only at 7.7%. The market's at 35%. You're not generating a ton of revenue. So these would be the listings that you might want to pay attention to. Like I said, this is a demo account, so some of this data is going to be incomplete. But if we were looking at a real live data, we'd actually get all of this information right here. So we would have your last booked date showing up in this column. You'd be able to see what the occupancy is in number form for this given period. You'd be able to see what the paid occupancy is. So like I said earlier in the webinar, we look at both total occupancy and paid occupancy in certain areas, what the revenue is, and then what your ADR is. You also have the ability to add in a couple things like pickup and market occupancy, as well as the number of bedrooms. So really helpful for identifying under or overperforming listings when you are managing a large portfolio. All right, any questions here before we move on to pacing? Feel free to drop them in the chat, or I'm sorry, in the Q&A, and David will take care of you. One last thing before we move on to pacing, this export PDF section, this actually applies to both the pacing charts and the KPI charts. If you have an owner that wants to see their own performance for an individual listing, you can generate a PDF that'll print out to them. That'll print out and you can send it over to them. If you have your logo uploaded into PriceLabs in your settings up here, you'll be able to see your logo right on that PDF. It's a really nice feature for reporting to owners or reporting to investors if you have investors, etc. Cool. So let's move on to the pacing reports because this is probably my favorite section of portfolio analytics. Again, you can just click show analytics when you get this filter drop down that shows up to view all listings at once. And we're going to give it a second to load. Covered this, but while it's loading, Okay, the pacing reports are important to understand your performance relative to the same time last year, as well as versus the final performance of your portfolio. This is where we can also compare your performance against the market. And this is where you'll be able to actually see visually the evolution of your booking curves. And I'll show you what that means in just a moment when we actually look at the booking curve section. Cool. So the pacing section is the first section that comes up here. You do have the jump to section here to look at pacing versus the market and booking curves. So the first section is pacing. This is where you can add market data. So if you have an active market dashboard, you can select it in this dropdown. And then if you want to look at a specific comp set, you can also add in that custom comp set here. And we'll update all these charts to include that data. Now, by default, we look at the monthly aggregation over the next 6 months. You can change this by clicking aggregating weekly. Over the next year, you just click update charts. Helpful thing right here, if you're using this a lot, you can remember the selection that you've made right here for the next time you come back to portfolio analytics. That way you're not always having to select these in the drop-down menu. All right, so the future pacing charts, it covers all the forward-looking data relative to the data last year for those same dates. So what are we looking at here? We have the listed price. So this is showing on average how my portfolio is priced week over week in comparison to the market. Pretty self-explanatory. If you've ever looked at the neighborhood data tab, it looks very similar to that. The second chart down here goes into a little bit more detail. I'm actually going to change it back to look at the next 3 months. That way we can see a little bit more detail. This is where we're looking at the occupancy, ADR, and RevPAR charts. So actually, yeah, weekly's fine. All right, so we're looking at the occupancy of your portfolio versus the market here. So the red line, the solid red line is where the market occupancy is at. The solid gray line is where your occupancy is at as of today for future dates. So we can actually see that this portfolio is slightly outpacing the market for future dates. We can also add in your occupancy last year today. So it looks like this portfolio, with the exception of the next few dates right here, looks like overall, oops, hate when I do that. Looks like overall this portfolio is outpacing itself from the same period last year. So that's what that dotted gray line is, your occupancy as of last year today. You can also add in the market occupancy as of last year today. So the market as a whole is really pacing behind where it was last year, but you are outperforming your own performance from last year as well as the market performance from this year. Doesn't look like you're quite on par over the next week to be on par with like the market's performance from last year, but looking forward, this portfolio is doing pretty well. We can also add in the final last year data to see where that final occupancy ended at. So your occupancy last year, this different dotted gray line is where your final occupancy was. And then we can also add in pickup. So pickup tells us, and let me just like hide some of this so that it's a little easier to read. Okay, so the pink and the blue lines indicate the pickup. Pink line is showing me my pickup, blue line is showing the market pickup. What pickup means is how much of the occupancy was gathered in the last 7 days. So by default, we look at the pickup over the last 7 days. So for example, for the week of August 5th, we received 3.14% pickup, which means 3.14% of the occupancy for this week was generated within the last 7 days. So slightly behind where the market is. The market's at 3.4%. But you can see here in the future, my pickup is actually outperforming the market pickup. So more people are booking with my properties for these future dates than they are for other properties in the market. Hopefully that makes sense for pickup. Again, we have the help articles listed over here, and one of them is an overview of all the terminology that's included in portfolio analytics. So definitely check that out if you need a little refresher on what the terminology means. The next one, ADR. We covered what ADR is in the beginning, but you're able to see here on a chart how the ADR is evolving for the future dates. So it looks like my occupancy is outperforming the market, but my ADR is actually pacing a little bit behind. So again, you can click and hide where we're at. So my ADR is outperforming my own ADR. Oh no, my ADR is outperforming the market. Sorry, I had my colors mixed up. And it also looks like my ADR for the future is outperforming my last year ADR for the same time. Right, that's the, or no, it's actually not quite as high. I was looking at the, man, the colors are going to get me here. So my ADR today is slightly behind where it was at the same time last year. My final ADR is this one that I've just added in. So what can I gather by this? My final ADR might be a little bit lower than where the market is. Because remember, your ADR is most likely in most cases going to come down as we get closer, because the most popular dates that sell for the highest price are usually the first to book for future stays. So that ADR is going to look really high, right? So 30th of September, we sold for a really high rate on average. That's probably going to come down as we get closer, right? That's how it was for last year, but then look how the final ADR was between the two lines. So that's why I'm saying the solid line might end up probably closer in, it might still outperform the market, but it might be underperforming where it was last year. Hopefully that made sense. And then your RevPAR, same thing, showing how it's evolving over time. And again, your RevPAR, it will probably start, actually, no, your RevPAR will probably start a little bit lower. And then as occupancy starts to fill in, your RevPAR is going to go up. So again, you can hide all the different metrics just to get a view of how you're performing against the market. Okay, so right now my RevPAR is really strong compared to the market because here I am and here's the market. Where was my RevPAR last year today? Roughly on par with where I was last year today. So this different ADR, we might end up seeing, based on the RevPAR, we might see things even out over time. So as long as that RevPAR is still pretty strong, or at least on par, depending on what your strategy is, that might be okay. On these charts too, you can also click to zoom in, double click to zoom back out. When you double click to zoom back out, it'll kind of show you everything. So if you need to reset, just go back up here, select the date range, click update charts, and that will show you the date range that you've selected. All right, there we go. All right, any questions on the pacing and pacing versus the market? Yeah, keep in mind that the reason why the market occupancy, ADR, and RevPAR is showing up here is because I've selected a market dashboard. If I didn't have a market dashboard selected, I would not see those lines. You would just be looking at your data year over year. All right, cool. Now let's take a look at the booking curves, because this is what I really like to look at just to get a visual on how I'm performing for future dates compared to last year. So by default, we're showing you current months for the booking curve. The first chart is showing you how your revenue is evolving over time. So day 0 right here, that indicates that it's the check-in day. So this is basically a countdown up until the check-in day, and the line follows any given month. So right here, you can see July 2024 is complete because yesterday was the last day of the month, and this is where we ended at. So when we were 30 days out from any check-in date that occurred in July, it looks like my revenue was at $44,000 for the month. And then we can see how it grew over those last 30 days to get us to that final revenue of 54.2K. What I like to do with this is not go with the current months, but change it to view custom dates and look at the corresponding dates from last year. You can always look at uh, custom dates here. I just like looking at the month. So let's see how August is looking compared to the corresponding dates from last year. So now we've just started August. What can I expect through the end of the month? All right. Wow. Look, my revenue is much higher than where I was as of today last year, which is where this. Oops, oh, great. What did I just do? All right. There we go. So as of today, compared to last year, I'm really outperforming. So let me zoom in a little bit. So here's my revenue. And then this is where I was as of last year today. So 30 days out. So we can probably expect to see more pickup over the next 30 days until we get to the end of the month in terms of revenue. Now, revenue doesn't give us the full picture because I know that this portfolio took on more properties over the last year. So the increase in revenue might be due to an increase in listings that I manage. So then we start to look at things like occupancy. How is my occupancy comparing to the same time last year? Well, looks like even my occupancy is outpacing, not quite as strong as the revenue is, but the occupancy looks like it is slightly ahead of where I was at the same time last year by about 5 to 6% consistently. Now, I do see that we're starting to slope off a little bit here. So are we going to end in line with where we were last year, or will we expect the curve to keep going up? That's something that you can monitor. And then ADR always looks a little funky because, like I said, the highest priced and highest demand dates are typically the first to book. So your ADR starts off really high. Like I said before, that example of Christmas is going to be sold at the highest price. But as time goes on, you might see that you'll see that ADR probably start to come down to end with where the final ADR is. So it looks like my ADR for this portfolio is right on par pretty much with where I was last year. I'm about $10 behind. But how's my RevPAR looking? And this is, like I said, one of the more important metrics. So it looks like overall my RevPAR is actually outperforming where I was last year, and that's taking into account the occupancy and the ADR. So it looks like I'm doing pretty well for August. So hopefully we can expect this curve to kind of go up again, and that will end outperforming the year before. If you change it to look at, let's say we want to look at last month, you'll see that the lines are completed all the way to the end here. So yeah, July outperformed in revenue, slightly behind in occupancy, slightly behind in ADR. And yes, my RevPAR ended behind. So my July of last year, even though my revenue increased quite a bit, the performance overall was slightly weaker. So for example, if I had the same number of listings that I had at this time last year, I might be underperforming in terms of like what my total revenue was. All right. Any questions on the evolution of the booking curves? Any questions in general? We have about 10 minutes left. If you do have any questions, drop them in the chat or into the, preferably the Q&A, sorry. All right. Well, if there's no questions, then I think we'll go ahead and end this webinar. Kate, that makes sense. I know it kind of covers a lot. Keep in mind, you do have your help articles down here. In the help articles, we go a little bit further into detail on what the data actually can infer. For example, if your occupancy is starting to outpace the market, it may mean that you have an opportunity to increase prices. Um, because you're probably booking a little bit ahead of what other people are typically doing with their booking window. If your occupancy is lower than the market, then maybe it's an indicator that your pricing is too high, things like that. Things like that we dive into in the help articles. If your pickup is outperforming the market, and I don't have the market data showing here, but when it was showing before, for example, I think it was the week of August 25th that was outperforming in terms of pickup. If I saw that there was like significant pickup for my listings versus the market, that might also be another indicator that you can increase the prices if we're within your booking window. Yeah, so things like that we dive into a little further in detail in the help article. So definitely refer to that. We also have a video guide on YouTube that actually breaks these sections down into bite-size nuggets of knowledge that might be a little bit easier for people to digest as you go through each sections. And again, we do run this webinar once a month on the first Thursday of every month. It's always run by myself or someone on the team with live questions. So you're always able to rejoin that webinar. And again, if you ever get stuck, we have our education section right here. So the resources where you can also sign up for trainings, keep up to date on any updates. And then if you're really stuck and you need to reach out to support, we have that right here. You can either chat or email us or search our knowledge base. All right. Well, with that being said, thank you again for joining everyone. I'm Monique. I have David here on Q&A, and we will see you soon. Have a good one.